Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 35 of the Holistic Living Podcast. Today we are talking about BPAs, BPS, BPF, all of those family of bisphenols that are actually super toxic. And I want to explain a little bit about what they are, why they are not ideal, the effects that they have on our body, and of course back it up with a lot of science. And then I'm going to give you some tips at the end for how you can avoid bisphenols, or specifically BPAs and BPSs. So first of all, BPAs and BPS, these bisphenols, they are used worldwide in so many products. They do have severe impact on our health. The FDA says it is safe to have these bisphenols in small amounts. I'm saying if something's toxic, it's not safe in any amount. But that being said, we are exposed to a much higher level than the FDA has approved. And so it has been causing an incredible amount of different health issues. So there's actually been a lot of pressure for companies to remove BPAs from their products. So I'm going to go explain a little bit about that and share my thoughts on this, because I personally, being a holistic practitioner, am always encouraging my clients to remove any source of toxicity possible. Obviously, we can't live 100% toxic-free life, but we want to live as low tox life as possible. We want to have the least amount of toxins entering our body so that we are not burdening our immune system, our liver, our kidneys, our gut, our brain, and all the rest of it, or at least minimizing the burden. Because we live in this modernized world, we are exposed to such high levels of toxins in our food, in our environment, in our water, the clothes we wear, the medications we're taking, and so on, that we need to help our bodies any way that we can. Essentially reduce the amount of work and stress that our body has to go through because of all the toxins that are in our life. And BPAs is one of the most common ones that we have seen affecting us from preconception, and then of course affecting fetuses, affecting women and men of all ages, children especially. There's really across the board severe side effects and implications of being exposed to BPAs. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So what is BPA? BPA is called bisphenol A. It's a chemical compound primarily used in the manufacturing of various plastics. It is a synthetic organic compound used in the manufacture of epoxy resin, and other polymers. Specifically, when we're talking about bisphenol A, there's also bisphenol S, or BPS. So to comply with restrictions and regulations on BPA due to its confirmed toxicity, you guys can go ahead and do a quick Google search and find hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed scientific journals confirming the toxicity of BPA in both animals and humans. So because of its confirmed toxicity, a lot of manufacturers have been gradually replacing the BPA with other related compounds, mainly bisphenol S, or BPS, as substitutes in industrial applications. So what is BPS? BPS is related to its chemical cousin, BPA. It's an organic compound that's used to make hard plastic and synthetic fibers, and it is commonly used as a replacement for BPA in some types of paper receipts. It can be used to lengthen color life in fabric, so clothes that we're wearing, and is a food packaging preservative. It is classified as a bisphenol and a close molecular analog of BPA. So BPS differentiates from BPA by possessing a sulfone group, essentially sulfur and 2 oxygen, as a central linker of the molecule instead of a dimethylmethylene group, which is the case in the BPA. So many companies have understood that people are obviously worried about BPAs, and especially the past few years, more and more people have been saying we don't want exposure to BPA. So a lot of companies have been removing the BPA from their product, but like I said earlier, instead they're just substituting it with BPS, which is just as harmful, science and studies have confirmed, if not worse than BPA. BPS is an endocrine disruptor, as is BPA, and has comparable health risks to that of BPA. BPS has been shown to increase the expression of breast cancer, carcinogens, and the proliferation of positive breast cancer cells. Additionally, BPS exposure has been linked to impaired neural function. So high levels have been found to be significantly correlated with insulin resistance, albuminuria, and irregular vascular function in children. And pregnant women or women looking to become pregnant should reduce their exposure to BPS and BPAs because it has been shown to reduce egg viability and may reduce fertility outcomes as well. Now, BPAs and BPSs have been associated with cardiac issues, neurobehavioral issues, obesity, metabolic imbalances such as diabetes and insulin resistance, liver toxicity. They also have effects on our skeletal development. They are endocrine disruptors, so can cause a whole host of hormonal issues, especially in women, but also in men. They cause issues with fertility, reproductive health, and so much more. And I'll explain more as we move through the podcast. So BPS, like BPA, can cross the placenta and alter the endocrine functionality of the placenta. It does this by reducing the maternal serum concentration of trophoblastic proteins. BPS shows almost identical effects on the placenta as BPA, with both BPS and BPA altering almost identical sets of genes. So fetal exposure to BPS through the placenta during the critical period of development can have negative effects on the developmental programming of the fetus. So BPS exposure, they found in one study in the zebrafish model, affected the development of the hypothalamus and resulted in hyperactive behavior in children. So it's kind of crazy, before I continue, what kind of blows my mind is essentially like how companies can spin things. So I remember a few years ago, I actually had on my membership platform, holisticspring.org, I did a post on this a few years ago. And I made a post on the topic of BPA and BPS because a few years ago, I remember when a lot of companies started to advertise on their bottles, on their products, BPA free. And everybody was so excited. People were going ahead and buying the canned goods and the things that said BPA free because they were like, oh, this is going to be, they finally got rid of that Bisphenol A. Everything's healthier now. And right away I came on my blog and I was like, made a post and I was like, you realize that they're just replaced BPA with BPS, and BPS has started to really come out with a lot of research over the past few years that it's actually even more toxic and damaging in many ways than BPA. So companies are out there promoting their product as BPA free and plastic water bottles for children as BPA free and plastic containers that you're sending to your kids' school, as BPA free, and you think, I'm doing a great job, which it's not on you. You think you are. It's on the company who is essentially deceiving people by just using a different chemical instead and just trying to appease. And what's really sad is that we have to even worry about these chemicals in the first place. They should be banned. We know they're toxic. There's hundreds of studies confirming it, yet these chemicals are allowed. And it's just kind of crazy how that's even possible. In 2024, where there's, an insane amount of disease and cancer and cardiovascular issues, and the list goes on, and we are allowing the continuation of these chemicals to be used, especially in children's products. Our kids are playing with plastic toys all the time, and they're, eating out of plastic lunchboxes and drinking out of plastic bottles when they're at school and eating processed foods that are in plastic wrappers, and the list goes on, and they're the ones that are having the worst effects because they're having the most exposure. So it's really I'm very passionate about this topic because it's I don't want to use the word triggering because I don't love that word, but it actually is, in the sense of it's so hard for us to protect ourselves and our family and our children from chemicals when they are being pushed on us left, right, and center. And it's why I always strive to have what I call like a low tox life, because Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, you cannot avoid toxins from everywhere. It's impossible because they are everywhere. And that's, the part that irks me is that we even got to this point. But at least if you're eating as clean food as you can and you're really filtering your water and you're trying to avoid, as many of these toxins as possible, you're limiting your exposure. You're not getting rid of it 100%, but just helping the body as much as possible. So just wanting to raise awareness on this topic that these chemicals, they are toxic. Be careful when companies are advertising that something's BPA free and this and that. It's just full of other chemicals instead. So when we try to move away from packaged foods, we're going to help ourselves a lot. Like I said, I'll explain more at the end of the podcast on how we can avoid these chemicals more. But really just trying to get whole foods that are not in containers, not in cans, not in plastics, will help a lot reduce our exposure to these BPAs and BPSs. So moving on, I want to share a study. It was from Thoen et al. It was done in 2020, and it was in the Journal of Nutrition. And the title was Bisphenol S in Food Causes Hormonal and Obesogenic Effects Comparable to or Worse than Bisphenol A. So there's just explaining how BPS is comparable, if not worse, than BPA. And BPS is what's essentially been replaced for BPA in most products today. I'm going to read you just a little bit from the article. And it says, in recent years, bisphenol analogs such as BPS have come to replace BPA in food packaging and food containers since BPA has been shown to leach into food and water, causing numerous negative health effects. Unfortunately, little or no research was done to determine the safety of BPA-free products before they were marketed to the public as a healthier alternative. This is what bothers me. So the latest studies have shown that some of these bisphenol analogs, like BPS, may be even more harmful than the original BPA in some situations. So this article that I'm reading to you, it used a literature survey to investigate the bisphenol analog BPS and compare it to BPA and other analogs with regards to increased obesity, metabolic disorders, cancer, and reproductive defects, among others. And so it was found that BPS works via different pathways than does BPA, while causing equivalent obesogenic effects, such as activating pre-adipocytes, and that BPS was correlated with metabolic disorders such as gestational diabetes, which is huge here because how many women today are getting gestational diabetes? And it was also that BPA was not correlated with gestational diabetes. So what's kind of crazy here is essentially what they're saying is that BPS is correlated more heavily with metabolic disorders, gestational diabetes, obesity, etc., where BPA wasn't as much. BPS was also shown to be more toxic to the reproductive system than BPA and was shown to hormonally promote certain breast cancers at the same rate as BPA. So they remove one toxin and replace it with something that's equal or worse and tell you, this is a healthier product and we're BPA free, we're this and that, and people are buying into it, not realizing that they have not done you any favors. So there's a pretty strong argument to be made to regulate BPS in exactly the same manner that BPA has been starting to be regulated. Now, the Mayo Clinic explains a little bit about BPA. It's a chemical that's been used since the 1950s. And it is found in polycarbonate plastics and epoxy resins, like again, I mentioned earlier. Polycarbonate plastics are often used in containers that store food and beverages, like water bottles, cans, and so on. They may also be used in other consumer goods. Epoxy resins are used to coat the inside of metal products like food and beverage can linings, bottle tops, and water supply lines. Even some dental sealants and composites also often contain BPA. Some research has shown that BPA can seep into food or beverages from the containers that they're in that are made with BPA or BPS, and exposure to BPA or BPS is a concern because of the possible health effects on the brain and prostate gland of fetuses, infants, and children. It can also affect children's behavior. Additional research suggests a possible link between BPA and BPS and increased blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So while BPA is the most well-known member of this chemical class, Again, similar compounds like BPS and even bisphenol F, BPF, which is the fluoride family, are chemical cousins that are also a huge concern. Unfortunately, when states and companies restricted the use of BPA, many manufacturers turned to these similar and also toxic compounds and put all their products on the shelves again. And people have just been now assuming that they're a healthier option and have actually been using the products more than before and are now having higher exposure. Researchers have linked developmental exposure to bisphenols and to reproductive and developmental harm as well. So it's kind of crazy. So how are we exposed to these bisphenols? Where are they most commonly? So they're everywhere. They're widely used, and exposure can come from many sources. A few direct sources would come from different products that we're using. So food and drink can linings is really common. Bisphenols will leach into food, drinks, and formula when they are used to line food and drink cans. So if you are drinking out of water bottles, if you're using canned goods a lot, which most people are today with inflation, a lot of canned stuff is the cheapest stuff. And so that's what we're going to use. And when you're, giving your baby formula, it's in usually a lined container, and there's going to be BPAs leaching into that. Thermal paper. So bisphenols are applied as a coating to the thermal paper commonly used for receipts as well as tickets and medical records. This is huge. If you guys ever see me in real life, so most of you don't know me because you've never seen me, you live somewhere else. But if you ever come across me in real life, you will probably laugh out loud if you see what I do when it's time to collect a receipt from the store. So usually I just say I don't want the receipt and I'll leave it. But if for some reason I forget and they hand me the receipt, I literally pull my sleeve down and I grab it with my sleeve. I'm not touching that, because the second you touch it, study and researchers have confirmed that it absorbs immediately into your skin and then into your bloodstream. And thermal paper and like receipts have the highest BPAs and BPSs than anything else. The biggest amount, essentially. So they are one of the most toxic things. So one way that you can substantially just reduce your exposure to these BPAs is to not touch receipts. Now, if you are working as a cashier or in a job that you're touching these receipts or thermal papers a lot, you're going to have higher exposure. This sounds ridiculous, but I say wear gloves. Okay. You throw on some gloves, BPA, BPS free gloves, mittens, whatever you need. Or try to just go paperless as much as possible at your business or in work or wherever. But that's a big source. We are also exposed to them through dental material. So they can leach from dental sealants and polymers like fillings, even if you get any cavity fillings, things like that. Polycarbonate plastic. So bisphenols are the building blocks for polycarbonate, the plastic used for compact discs and many hard, clear plastic items, such as eyewear and toys. So if you're having glasses on, the plastic toys your kids play with and chew on, be careful with that one. Your hairbrushes, literally anything made out of hard plastic has BPAs or BPSs in it. It's kind of crazy. If you look around your home, I would say a good 50% minimum of the items that you're looking at or touching daily are full of BPAs or BPSs. So with their widespread presence and products in our homes, schools, workplaces, etc., BPAs, BPSs, these bisphenol compounds are also found in indoor dust, an important route of toxic exposure. Several bisphenols have been widely detected in U.S. supermarket food, with the highest dietary exposures estimated for toddlers and infants. I want to read that one line again, okay, from the article. Several bisphenols have been widely detected in U.S. supermarket food, with the highest dietary exposures estimated for toddlers and infants. So they're in our air, right? They're off-gassing, they're in the air, you're going to breathe it in. But more importantly, they're in our food supply. And where are they in our food supply? Obviously in the packaged and processed foods. And today in our American diet, what are children being fed? Packaged and processed foods. Granola bars and fruit cups and everything's coming out of plastic or cans. And what's heartbreaking is that, those pouches that the babies are eating out of, it's all BPAs, BPSs. What's heartbreaking is that the effects are so strong and they're being pumped into somebody so small, and not to me, not by the parents' fault. We shouldn't have our child's food in toxic containers, but it's how it is. But they're being pumped into our children's bodies, and the effects are so strong that when we're wondering, why is our child so young and getting, diabetes, obesity, different serious health issues, you detect their BPA or BPS levels. They're usually quite high. And what's crazy is that our disease is starting younger and younger, and it's literally starting off our children's life with severe toxicity. And then it's just setting them up for more and more health issues as they grow. So bisphenols are high production volume chemicals, and they're found widely in the indoor and outdoor environments and in people. So with its well-established toxicity and widespread human exposure, bisphenols have raised the greatest amount of concern. Recent research, however, has found that other bisphenols are present at similar concentrations in the environment to BPAs, and they have similar toxicity. The one I want to mention, the fluorinated compound in the bisphenol, so it's called BPAF. This specific bisphenol is extremely persistent in our bodies and in the environment. Washington State has designated BPA, BPF, and BPS as chemicals of high concern for children. So more than 90% of people in the US have been found to carry BPA residues in their body, more than 90%. And all other bisphenols have also been widely detected in people as well. The human body breaks down and excretes biphenyls within a few days. So these consistent measurements in humans mean that we have ongoing exposure to these compounds. Hold on though, don't think that, it's good that I'm excreting them, because BPS actually sit in the body, and I'll get to that shortly. BPA has also been measured in breast milk, amniotic fluid, and follicular fluid, providing evidence, that the developing fetus and infant are also exposed. Before I continue, I have a book that I created, a digital book, like an ebook, a couple years ago, 2 years ago maybe, and it's called The 4 Seasons of a Woman's Cycle. And in that book, I go into great detail. There's different protocols for every kind of health and hormonal imbalance that a woman experiences that you can think of. And one of them was infertility, but also I talked about how to have a healthy pregnancy. And in there, I shared some statistics where they tested the amniotic fluid, and they tested through blood after the baby was born, and they tested the cord blood as well, placenta, and they found very, very high levels of BPA in infants and in fetuses and in the mother as well, which is crazy when you think about someone's, again, so tiny, starting off their life with such high toxicity. What's actually even crazier is especially, we're seeing more and more cases of low sperm count in men. We're seeing for girls and for women infertility. And when we're testing and you're seeing this infertility, a lot of the time they're just like, here's IVF, or here's, some crazy expensive treatment. They're not actually realizing that if you are exposed to high levels of bisphenols in utero and other chemicals as well, when your child is developing in the womb, especially female, she's going to have all of her eggs in her body in utero, and that's what's going to help her have children when she's born. So all the eggs are formed in utero. And if there's high levels of BPAs, that reproduction, the egg count, that's going to be harmed and hindered. And so before she's even hit puberty, this tiny little baby has already potentially going to have fertility issues, hormonal issues, just from the toxins, the bisphenol she was exposed to while in utero. So it's something that, especially if you're pregnant, thinking to get pregnant, it's so, so important to be careful what you're touching, what you're breathing in, what you're eating, to protect the baby as well. So bisphenols have been linked to harmful effects on our health. BPA is a known hormone disruptor, and lab studies show that other bisphenols are also estrogenic, and some are even more potent. So when I always am saying online, don't consume anything out of plastics, they're endocrine disruptors, that's what we mean. They disrupt our hormones, they mimic estrogen, they mimic like a toxic estrogen, xenoestrogens we call them, and they can cause cancer and all kinds of issues because that's what that type of estrogen does. BPA and other bisphenols impact reproduction, with laboratory studies showing altered mating and maternal behavior effects on, I'll say that again so it makes more sense. BPA and other bisphenols impact reproduction, with lab studies showing altered mating and maternal behavior, effects on prostate, and reproductive success. Lab studies also show that bisphenols affect brain development in the areas of learning, memory, and behavior, and BPA exposure is associated with hyperactivity. So again, we're seeing children with, ADHD and this hyperactivity kind of behavior, but they're also living off of very processed foods. Everything's coming out of a package, typically a juice box, something that's been lined. And so they're having high BPA, BPS exposure, which is affecting their neurological system and then causing, those types of symptoms as well. So a lot of times, we're so quick to say, oh, is there ADHD in their family history? Is there this and that? But a lot of times it's something that has formed as a result of the toxic exposure. So another thing to mention is that studies in like animal studies, so laboratory animal studies, have found that BPA depresses the immune system as well. So again, why are we getting sick so frequently? Why can't we fight things? Well, maybe we're exposed to a lot of BPAs and BPSs. There's a article, it was from Pant et al., done in 2023. It's a review article. So they took all of, many different studies done on BPSs and BPAs, and they did a review. So the title was Bisphenol S, a potential toxicant in daily use review. So they compiled a lot of research articles together. And I'm going to read a little bit through the article, just sharing some points that I found really important and interesting as well. So humans are exposed to both BPA and BPS mainly through the dietary route. So we're ingesting like canned foods and beverages, things that are in plastic containers, etc. Likewise, the inhalation and cutaneous absorption, so through the skin of BPS, through things like banknotes and thermal receipts have also been reported. BPS has been detected in numerous products used daily, like shampoo, toothpaste, lotions, deodorants, etc., etc. BPS has also been found in paired maternal and cord serum, suggesting that human fetuses may be exposed to BPS through the placenta. One of the many effects found was that oral BPS is completely absorbed from the intestines. So if you are eating something that had BPS in it, say you had canned something, you will absorb all the BPS. It's completely absorbed from the intestines into the bloodstream. The ingested BPS is mainly metabolized in the liver, and only 41% of this absorbed BPS is what we call glucuronidated. So this indicates that the remaining proportion remains within the body, and in contrast to BPA, which has a 0.50% systemic bioavailability. So just to reiterate this again, what they're saying is, when I mentioned earlier that these bisphenols are not fully leaving our body, so they're saying that only the liver is metabolizing only about 41% of BPS. So the remaining 59% is going to stick in our body. So this increases the availability of the chemical for the tissues and hence remains a matter of concern. This may affect several organ systems in turn and can affect the overall health of an individual in the long term. BPA has been reported to produce numerous reproductive abnormalities in the form of decreased fertility in male rats due to a defective sperm quality and quantity, a decreased number of offspring per breeding pair, an altered estrous cycle, and decreased offspring survival and its development. Similarly, BPS has also been reported to produce reproductive defects. Now, what I like to say is if something is happening in an animal, it's going to happen to humans as well. So a lot of times I hear people say, oh, but that's an animal study. And their bodies function very similar to humans. And it's why we test on animals first. Usually if something's going really wrong in an animal study, it will never progress to a human trial because we know that if something seems toxic for an animal, it's definitely going to affect us as well. And like we just, found out here in this little, paragraph, BPA has reported in rats to have to trigger or cause defective sperm quality and quantity. Really important there, especially when, again, we're looking at fertility and trying to get pregnant. BPS has been found to affect the female reproductive system as well, even in very low doses. It has been reported that BPS reduces ovarian weight and the volume of ovaries, along with a reduction in the number of antrum follicles and their volume. This is accompanied by a reduction in plasma 17-beta estradiol levels in animals. Another thing that they mentioned in the article was the cardiotoxic effects of BPA have already been documented in numerous studies, and it is well proven that BPA decreases the atrial contractility. So we're talking about the heart now, produces arrhythmias, and is associated with cardiovascular disorders in humans and suppresses ventricular function. It has been found that the urinary levels of BPA are higher in patients with coronary artery disease. Very interesting. Furthermore, a study was done by Asano et al., and they demonstrated that BPA led to the vasodilation of coronary arteries by opening maxi-K channels. So we're just looking at all kinds of arterial and cardiovascular issues just from this BPA exposure. A previous study reported that perinatal exposure to BPS led to an increase in body weight in male mouse offspring. Another thing to note, while BPS is less damaging to the liver than BPA, in the study by Zhang et al., it was shown that exposure to 5,000 UG or per kilogram for BPS for a period of 8 weeks was associated with liver injury, with deranged biochemical parameters such as an increase in the plasma levels of alanine aminotransferase, aspartate aminotransferase, and total bilirubin. There was also cytoarchitectural damage to hepatic cells observed. So essentially what they're saying is while BPS seems to be a little bit less damaging to the liver than BPA, essentially there is still damage to the liver cells and liver injury essentially. BPS is likely to accumulate in the body and environment, as a large proportion of it remains unconjugated in the body, and it is also not completely biodegradable. Hence, this raises a question about the safety of its use in BPA-free products and raises some concerns regarding the safety of the use of plastics, thermal receipts, food and beverage cans, etc. This should be something big. So for people who are, really big planet advocates, if they're trying, to aim for a healthier world, this should be something that's really triggering, because it's not just about, the physical plastic or there's so much garbage and recycle, but we want to say, well, also the chemicals that are used to make up these products are literally destroying the earth. And if they're in our earth, they're destroying the essentially bacterial colonies and the microbiome of the earth. So the colonies and the toxicity, we're planting food in toxic soil, and the list goes on. So we want to be looking at not just the effects that it's having on our bodies, not just the fact that, a ton of plastic and garbage is polluting the earth, but more importantly, what's made the chemicals that are making up the plastic is what's actually harmful to the planet, what's more harmful to the planet, to, the animals and the fish in the sea, and the list goes on. Okay, there's another article I want to bring up. It's from Al-Harbi et al., done in 2022, so pretty recent, from the International Journal of Environmental Restitution Public Health. It's exposure to bisphenol A substitutes, bisphenol S and bisphenol F, and its association with developing obesity and diabetes mellitus. It's a narrative review. This is a really interesting article I had to share, because it kind of blows my mind again that we overlook so much of this. We're like, it's just a little bit of toxins. And we don't really think about if it's just a little bit, but day in and day out, it's a lot. It's a lot of exposure. So the side effects can also be pretty grave. So I wanted to go into this article a little bit. The results showed that BPS and BPF were detected in many urinary samples. At the exposure level that they commonly found in these samples, the BPS were associated with the development of obesity. Obviously, a lot of obesity will be, you're you're eating, way too many calories, you're eating a ton of sugar, you're not exercising. Sure. But some people are genuinely having a hard time losing weight, even when they're eating clean and they're moving their bodies. And it comes down to the fact that these toxins are destroying our metabolic system. At a lower exposure level than was even found, 2 studies showed an association with developing diabetes. For BPF exposure, only 1 study showed an association with obesity. However, most of the reported studies only assessed BPS exposures, so more research obviously needs to be done to confirm the negative effects of BPF, as they are certainly there. They just mostly are focusing on BPS and BPAs. But from this review, the results found support the results that were found, it supported the possible obesogenic effects and metabolic disorders mediated by the BPS and or BPF exposure. Unexpectedly, BPS may promote worse obesogenic effects than BPA. So again, they say, we're getting rid of BPA, it's BPA-free lining, and it's just BPS instead, which increases your rate and risk for obesity much more than BPA. In addition, the possible mode of action underlying the obesogenic effects of BPS might be attributed to various pathophysiological mechanisms, including estrogenic or androgenic activities, alterations in the gene expression of critical adipogenesis-related markers, and induction of oxidative stress, and an inflammatory state. Guys, this is crazy. If you need to go back 15 seconds and re-listen to that, please do, to really understand how serious and bad this is. Furthermore, susceptibility to the adverse effects of BPS may be altered by sex differences, according to the results of both epidemiological and experimental studies. However, the possible mode of action underlying these sex differences is still unclear. So in conclusion, exposure to BPS or BPF may promote the development of obesity and diabetes. It does vary a little bit from male and female results, but they're still there. More studies are continuing and they are being done, and I'm excited to see what results we get from that. I don't even know if I feel hopeful that these chemicals will ever be fully banned, and if they are, they're probably just going to be replaced with new chemicals. So again, go back to nature, go back to basics, guys, as much as we can here. So how can we reduce our exposure? Well, the receipts we receive when we buy groceries, prescriptions, gas, clothing, restaurant meals, and much more are always printed on thermal paper typically, which is coated with either the BPA or its chemical cousin BPS. So BPA and BPS are developers that assist in the heat-activated printing process. So it's why they're used. BPA can be absorbed, and BPS as well, into the body through the skin. So the chemicals have been shown to be hazardous to our reproductive system. We know that now, and that they're linked to obesity and attention disorders. So that is I would say step 1, just try not to touch receipts, literally that simple. I'm going to read something to you before I explain how to reduce exposure. Studies have found that individual thermal receipts can contain BPA that is 250 to 1,000 times greater than the amount in a can of food. That's insane. Testing thermal paper samples from 18 hospitality businesses in Minnesota found that half of them contained BPA at levels ranging from 54 to 79 micrograms per square centimeter of paper. That's insane. BPA is commonly used in other products, such as hard polycarbonate plastic, so helmet visors, eyeglass lenses, some water bottles, children's toys, things like that. They're also used in epoxy resins for adhesives, sealants, food can linings, and in flame retardants. Some manufacturers have been removing BPA from their products to protect consumers. So you might have seen water bottles that are marketed as BPA free, but then there's typically BPS. So you're still kind of getting the same toxic bisphenol family. So if you are concerned about BPA, you can take steps to reduce your exposure. Like I said, when possible, go paperless. Choose alternatives to paper receipts, such as an email copy. Otherwise, limit handling and washing your hands after you touch receipts. Or do what I do and I literally grab it with my sleeve and throw it in the nearest garbage. You also want to choose alternatives to polycarbonate plastic. So for baby bottles, sports water bottles, for example, for babies, you can use a glass bottle. That's what I did with my son. You can do the cloudy plastic bottles, those are better choices. For sports bottles, the best choice is stainless steel or glass. You can also choose powdered rather than liquid infant formula. And if you do need liquid formula, use a bisphenol-free containers. You want to limit your intake of canned foods, of foods in plastic. You want to not use Tupperware or like those plastic food storage containers, period. You also want to use BPA-free and BPS-free products. So one thing I'll say here, manufacturers, like I said, are creating more and more BPA-free products. So you want to look for BPA-free, but it also should say BPS-free as well. If a product isn't labeled, keep in mind that some, but not all, plastics marked with recycle code 3 or 7 may contain BPA. Okay, so plastics that are marked with recycle code 3 or 7 commonly contain BPA. So you can look at the label. But typically, if it doesn't say BPA and BPS free, I don't touch it. You want to avoid heat. So don't go putting plastic containers in the microwave or the dishwasher because the heat can break them down over time and allow them to leach into foods. You want to focus on fresh whole foods. So when you can, choose fresh whole fruits and vegetables. Try not to buy, again, processed foods that are in these containers, in these plastic wrappers and things like that. And then you want to use alternatives. So instead of using, plastic containers, I use glass. They're not Tupperware. I don't know what the brand is, but I get them from Costco. It's just literally a glass container. They do have a plastic lid, but I never let the food touch the plastic lid. And I never heat the lid up ever. And also I'll never put the lid on if my food is hot. So that way nothing's leaching. The other thing is you can use like glass, porcelain, stainless steel containers for hot foods and liquids instead of plastic. You want to avoid generic skincare products. So many of them are full of BPAs and BPSs, those bisphenol compounds, and those I say steer clear. So shampoos, things like that are generic, oftentimes do have it and it'll absorb through your skin. So those are some of the main things. Another thing is I like to open up my windows, because a lot of dust will have BPA in it from, everything in your home. So open up windows as much as you can, have good ventilation in your home, have air filters and purifiers, have a dust-free home as much as you can. And for children, try to really limit plastic toys. Now it's hard, like my kids love Lego. I'm assuming there's bisphenols in there and things like that. But in general, especially for my baby, I'm trying to get him more like away from those kinds of toys and more natural wooden toys and products that are bisphenol free. There's a lot more things you can do, and I encourage you to go ahead and do your own research, learn more about the topic, learn more about what foods you're consuming that might have these bisphenols in it. Can we get it out of the body? Well, a lot of it does sit in our system, but what is beautiful is that at least in homeopathy, we are focusing on the drainage at the cellular level. We're removing toxicity from our cells. So I do believe that we can pull a lot of this out through drainage therapy, detoxification, and supporting our body, but especially supporting our liver, which is really taking the brunt of, everything, having to deal and metabolize these bisphenols. So giving your liver lots of love, utilizing some nice homeopathics, working with a practitioner to help you eliminate the buildup, really being careful, especially if you are trying to conceive or are currently pregnant, with what you're ingesting, so you can have limited exposure and toxicity to the baby. Just really being careful overall, even with the clothes you're wearing. I say, these fast fashion brands where clothes are cheaper, they usually are covered in chemicals. They usually have a strong smell. They're pure plastic clothing, and there's a lot of those BPAs and BPSs in the product that will absorb through your skin when you're wearing them all the time. So try to use high quality clothing, high quality brands, pay a bit more, but shop a bit less in terms of, the amount of clothes that you have. I say quality over quantity when it comes to clothing, because it's something that's on our body 24/7, and you want to be so careful with what you are absorbing through the skin. I hope that helps. Let me know if you guys have questions. You can post them to my social media. I would love for you to give me a follow on my Instagram, and I will share some information on how to find me in the description of the podcast episode. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are listening from, and I hope you learned something today, and I will talk to you in the next video or next episode. Bye.